Aloha-Namaste. Howdy, everyone, and thank you for coming and listening to my near-death experience. My name is Eric D. Mansfield, also known as Songbird I is We. So I'm going to share with you today one of my near-death experiences. I've had more than one in my life. I'm now 58 years old. So what I wanted to tell you about is when I was about 45 years old, I had been living on Maui for about 10 years. I had gone through a divorce and I stayed on the island even though I was insolvent and I was doing a work trade. It's called woofing. I was working on a permaculture estate and organic farm and nursery. And either in the mornings or in the evenings, I would go surfing. I've been a surfer all my life. I've surfed all over the world. And I've done permaculture and ecotourism all over the world as well, and spiritual sojourning. So I lived on the north shore of Maui, and my local surf break is called Ho'okipa. And it's a world famous windsurfing beach because it's got huge waves and a lot of wind. And it's also very famous for big wave surfing. It's got very deep water outside and it hits the reefs at about 30 feet depth or farther out. And really, it's huge. So one day I worked all day and instead of bringing the correct board with me, I brought my high performance longboard. I used to call it Leilani. And I went down to Ho'okipa and it was the afternoon and it was windy. And I had a lot on my plate: the divorce, no money, spiritual questions. I was just really being tested. And I wasn't in my normal sort of mode. Normally, when you're a surfer, you survey the scene for about 15 minutes before you go in the water. You make your decision where you're going to go out, how it's going to be, what equipment you're going to use. I didn't do that. I sat up against the wall watching the waves. And that day it was windy, but not too windy. And there were two swells. There was a kind of a messy west swell that was about double overhead, so about 12-foot faces to 15. And that was okay for the board I had, but there was a northwest swell coming, and it was about 25-foot swell. So 50-foot faces, the front of the wave, 50 feet high, 5 stories. And at Ho'okipa, there's no indicator reefs, so the waves just pop up all of a sudden out of deep water, and you don't really get any notice. So I sat there. I decided to go out on my longboard, 9.3. This is a longboard, and it was heavy. And even though I'm a good surfer, that was a stupid decision. I wasn't listening to my heart or my inner voice. And I was all caught up in the drama of my story for me. And I was trying to, surfing is a Zen art form when you do it correctly. But when you bring your stuff from the shore out with you in the water, it makes it worse. And I had not left my stuff on the shore. So I paddled out and I got out there, which surprised me. It was pretty tumultuous and treacherous already. And at Ho'okipa, there's a parking lot above the surf spot on the point. And normally I surf middles, but that day middles was closed out, which meant the wave all broke at one time. So I went out at pavilions, which is the right point. And for me, that's backside. I'm goofy foot. Means my back is facing the wave. And there was only one other guy out there. And then a young kid paddled out and he was on the right kind of board. And he looked at me and he laughed. He was a local Hawaiian kid. He says, "What are you doing out here on that?" And I realized he was right. Like, it occurred to me, oh my God, I got to go in. Well, right when I thought that, all the horns up on the hill started honking. Huge set of waves coming, probably 10 waves, bigger and bigger, starting at 30 foot, going up to 50. It was huge. So I started paddling as fast as I could, got over the first wave, got over the second wave, and there was no way I was going to make it over the third wave. And I was already in about 25 to 30 feet depth water with parts of the reef all around and the point behind me, very treacherous current. And I held onto my board till the last minute. I was going to try and duck dive through the wave, but it was too big. And so I was still at the surface when the wave broke on my back at the impact zone. It hit on my calves, damn near broke both my legs. It hurt so bad. And it broke my board, just snapped. I mean, I had a really strong board. If you know about surfing, it had Volan glass, extra patch, super strong blank, 3 stringers. It was a super strong board, but no match for those waves, power of water. So I had about a half a foot of the board attached to my leash. Now, normally when you're in big surf and you get pushed under, your board is a flotation device. You're attached to it with a leash and it'll pull you up. It'll show you which way is up. Well, when that wave broke on me and broke my board, it pushed me straight down. And it was like being in a washing machine, a gigantic one. I got ragdolled, and I mean big time. My knees, my heels hit the back of my head. My arms went positions I never thought were possible. So it drove me, and I was running out of air. I'd been under a long time, just getting washed around in the soup. And I swam as hard as I could, trying to get to the top and stroking. And then all of a sudden, boom, I hit my head on the bottom and I thought I was going up, but I couldn't tell because my board was gone. In that instant, when I hit the bottom, I almost got knocked out, but I still had enough wherewithal that I could decide in my mind to surrender. I surrendered all my thoughts, all my emotions, all my cognitions, all my compounded aggregates, my consciousness itself to awareness, to is, to what remains. And luckily I hit sand. It was between two pieces of reef and it almost knocked me out, gave me a concussion. All my air went out of me when I hit the bottom. And I had this split second. I chose to let go. I knew I couldn't make it. I figured I'm dead. This is it. And so I let go completely. And in that instant, here's the experience now. Pop, there was this pop out of my crown chakra and I popped out of my head. And all of a sudden, everything about Eric was gone. My life, my worries, my sadness, my jubilations, my failures and successes, everything, all of it was gone. But I was still awareness. And it was a very acute awareness. And I had a sense of a self, but it was like from the chi center up, and it was like an outline. The substance was spirit. It was not matter. And I was in this dark place, and it was warm and comforting. And it was a kind of darkness that was not a scary, fearful darkness, but it was like I was given the opportunity to look around. And so I did. I looked around in the darkness, and wherever you think you can go, you go. It's all telepathic. And I could feel like a soft, singing, warm voice behind me, but it wasn't really saying anything. It was just kind of making me comfortable. And then I looked up and I noticed all these iridescent spheres. They were bubbles, and they were everywhere. My field of view had hundreds of thousands of bubbles. So I was really curious. I was like, wow, look at those beautiful bubbles. They were super shiny. They looked like soap bubbles when they have the rainbows on them. And it was just amazing. They were so clear. So I went up to one and with my face, and I put my face into the bubble. All of a sudden, I was 4 years old, and I was in a memory of when I lived in Corona Del Mar as a kid. It was the place where the beehive fell on my head, and I had my first out-of-body experience at 4 years old. I was stung by 880 bees in my throat, and I was allergic, but I lived. I met God, but I was a little kid. So anyway, it took me back to that time. And it's funny because it was more than real. Smells smelled like they smell when you're 4 years old, and they're new to you when you're that age. So they're very pure and beautiful. Sounds and sights, the light looked more pure. Everything was just, I was literally in that moment. I was my 4-year-old self, and I was seeing myself I was remembering a very bad experience. And I re-experienced it. I'm not going to go into the detail of it. It's just it was really, a 4-year-old should not have to go through this. I was abused at the hands of my mother extremely for nothing. So I pulled out and I was like, wow. And I looked around and I could see a light, and I wanted to move towards the light or maybe to look into some more bubbles. But then all of a sudden I felt myself going backwards, and shoo, I was back in my body and I was floating. And I didn't have a surfboard. I had a little piece of foam attached to my leash, and I was in big trouble. I was like half a mile out, way past the breakers, in very deep water. The current was pulling me around the point, and I still had to get in. Now, luckily, I was a Olympic caliber swimmer when I was a kid, and body surfer, and grew up by the Wedge, Newport, and Sandy Beach in Hawaii. So I knew how to body surf. So that's what I did. I body surfed in with all my remaining energy. And I laid there on the sand. I barely got out of the water. I almost died twice. And I laid there with my face in the sand, panting and hearing my board getting crushed on the reef and just being so grateful. So that night, I went home. I was very tired. And I just sort of fell into a dead sleep. But before I go to sleep, I always meditate and give my sleep to sleep yoga. And I had a really profound experience where you might call him Yeshua. I call him the Christ. He came to me, and I had already had experiences with him earlier in my life. I knew he was real. I guess I'd been ignoring the still small voice, and he sat with me, took my hand, and he comforted me. And he just by taking my hand, I could feel that he was like, this is not the truth, right? This isn't real. You can relax. Just trust me. And then we had this conversation in my mind, and his words are like light. You can hear them and see them, but they're like light. They're so beautiful. And it makes me cry just thinking about how much love I felt. And he told me that the darkness was the omnipresence of divine love, and how it was formless and shapeless, and that it could be anything. and that how I had been ignoring the voice for truth that speaks from our heart within all of us, and how I had to burst these bubbles in my brain so that I could live in my heart. And he showed me how our heart has a neural network of like 50,000 neurons. And he showed me how your brain has trillions of neurons and how it's complicated, but your heart is very simple. And you can sit on, he showed me I had an empty throne in a room in my heart called your heart throne center. And it turns away. It looks at the light. It doesn't look at the world. And I don't want to get too deep into mystical about this. Some of it is secret just for me. But he showed me a couple of other of the bubbles. Like he brought me into that awareness again. And he said, these only are here because you're holding them here. And he showed me how we're the power, the I. And he showed me the oneness. And I knew it was valid and genuine because every time you have the mystical experience, it's always a unity experience. It's always a love experience. And if there's fear or danger or anything pops up, it's immediately dispelled by the efficaciousness of the light. So that experience lasted, it seemed like, for hours. And yet it may have only been, a brief moment. But when you're with him, it's timeless. And I saw all these other guides and ascended masters around him. I saw Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. I saw Krishna. I saw Mary Baker Eddy. I saw Joel Goldsmith. I saw Ananda. I saw Shankara. I saw Nanak. Yogananda. They were all there. And they were all smiling. And they were all, I don't want to say sending love. They were emanating this divine aura of love, all different degrees, like stars. And at the end of that experience, he just turned into a giant blaze of light and went out through my third eye. It was a really weird experience. And, the more I bring it back to thought, the more real it is. And that's the thing. It's like when you have one of these experiences that are genuine, it's a piece that passes understanding. It really is. You can't even really put words to it, although I'm trying. And it's funny because I'm a mystic bard all my life, poet, a writer, and yet Angel sang to me one time. I couldn't tell you about that song. I almost drowned a couple of times. I've been in car accidents and had a life review. The things that the people are saying on the videos on this channel, they're true. And the reason they're a little bit different is each of us has our own conscious awareness, and it comes through our awareness wherever we are at the time. And it uses whatever symbols that we have there to show us. At the time, I was doing A Course in Miracles, and it's all about the Christ. And so, of course, he was going to come through. But it's non-denominational. The truth is for everyone. What I gained from that experience helped carry me through a very difficult time and helped to show me that what I was studying was valid and helpful. And, just such a sense of gratitude. And it was a short experience, but I've gleaned so much from it since then. Now, at the time, I had switched up my path a little, and I was sincerely doing A Course in Miracles. Now, I came up through Christian Science and the Infinite Way. And since then, I've studied Advaita Vedanta, Zen, Taoism, Dzogchen, Mahayana, many things. And I was doing the Course in Miracles at the time. And A Course in Miracles talks to you about, it's really for people who have been through extreme abuse. It really helps a lot. And it went hand in hand with the teachings I'd already been taught. It was just a different way of saying it. And there's a part in the Course where it talks about grievances and how if we don't get rid of our grievances, then we can't have the miracle in our life, because the miracle is forgiveness and grace and going beyond your story, transcending your story. And so we're here to learn. And the way I see it is this is pass or fail. We're like in a kindergarten sandbox. And once you get some realization, you can either step onto the playground and learn that way, or you can fly and you can keep going. And so what I realized was I had been looking at an early moment in my life where I had laid up a grievance against my mother. And whether I thought she deserved it or not, you have to get rid of that. And what I've learned since then is we have to pop all those bubbles, every single one. Those weren't just from one lifetime. They were from many experiences. And as we realize the truth, they might pop one by one for a while, but eventually they'll all pop. You want to use the word God? God is real. It really is. And it's yourself. It's your own self, but it's not what you see in the mirror. It sees through the eyes, not with the eyes. It acts through the body, not with the body. It acts through the mind, not with the mind, right? So it's like the singular I, capital I, the impersonal, universal, mystical I that keeps coming back till it learns. This is pass or fail here, love or fear. If you choose love, you choose the miracle. And I have an acronym for love: letting omni value everything. We're letting one value everything. Value, not worth. Your wealth is not your worth. And there's no specialness. That was one of the biggest realizations that came from that. And the Course teaches that. You're not special. Love is sameness, it's oneness, it's equality, it's equanimity and equipoise and the middle way. And it's so beyond where our thinking can take us. You know, we're so easy to judge our experiences as good or bad, but really, as Shakespeare said, there's neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. And if we can, you can't really stop thoughts altogether, but in between thoughts, they're like waves on the ocean, and your mind is like the ocean. If you let your mind be like water, then when thoughts and emotions come through, if you're like riding with your finger on water, you didn't avoid it and it disappeared right away. You looked right at it. If your mind's like stone, it's going to take a long time for that writing to wear away. Or if your mind's like clay, same thing. But if you're like water, and remember in the Tao, it says water is the softest of elements, and yet it overcomes the most rigid, the most firm, and you can't grasp it. It looks like I'm going a long time here, so I'm going to give you guys back your time and say thank you for listening. Really appreciate this channel. These guys are awesome, and they're doing a great job. And if you have an NDE, talk to them. They're easy to work with, and they do good edits. Okay, guys, thank you.